every patient that came to me that was constipated had one big problem, and that was the peristaltic muscle didn't work. The peristaltic muscle must keep working and knead out the fecal matter up the ascending, transverse, descending, sigmoids, and on out. Keep it moving so we don't have to blast it loose. And this particular thing, I had to find an herb that was qualified to do it, and we found that Cascara sagrada was the herb. It is the herb that feeds the peristaltic muscle. Now, when I talk of peristaltic muscles, as most of you know, it's not just in the lower bowel. The peristaltic muscle is in the small intestine, it's in the vein, it's in the artery, it's absolutely in the nervous system. The peristaltic is there, but it becomes starved, hungry, it becomes constipated wherever it isn't fed properly. And so Cascara sagrada did the job for this, but barberry was the next one. And the reason we used barberry was because show me a sick person, we generally have a liver problem. And the barberry is the activator for the liver and gallbladder area. It gets the bile flowing. It cleans it out. We also found out that we needed a few other things. And one of them that we needed in this formula was golden seal, a very small amount, but it was there for infection. We needed cayenne, there as a stimulant, and to stop the bleeding, and to act as an accentuator. We needed lobelia. We needed, step by step, the various things. We needed sweet fennel seed, and the sweet fennel gets rid of the gas. But while it's getting rid of the gas, sometimes we have a few problems. That gas rolls around and we get pains. We had to put in Jamaica ginger to offset the pains because it's an antispasmodic. The only actual laxative that's in that whole formula of our lower bowel tonic is turkey rhubarb. Turkey rhubarb, also called China rhubarb or India rhubarb, is so mild it's called an aperient. It is so mild that you can make up the tea and feed it to a little constipated infant that's screaming with constipation pains, and just give some of this for a little period of time, and the baby will quit crying, start laughing, happy. Why? Because it's just had a great big BM. And you've got to clean it up. It doesn't. It's too young. But it works just this way. That's how mild turkey rhubarb is. And that's the only true laxative that's in this whole formula. But it works, and it is not habit-forming. And the reason we have used this formula because it follows through every step. As a true herbalist, we're supposed to use, number one, there is not one herb in that formula that is toxic. Number two, there is not one herb in that whole formula that is poisonous, because we do not use poison herbs. And number three, there is not one herb that is habit-forming. You know, the habit-forming herbs are the ones that we have to be careful of, because we do have herbal laxatives that are habit-forming. We do have many things that are habit-forming. Well, I should know. Great balls of fire. None of you will ever have to take Phenamint or X-Lax, Epsom salts, castor oil. You won't have to take any herbal formulas for laxatives at all, because I use enough for all of you. We have a formula here that is good enough that we've had so many people enthralled with it. We had a Jewish fellow, I'll have to tell you about him. He was an interesting soul. He and his girlfriend had been coming 3 years to our classes. We have a series of weekly classes we used to have that we'd have preliminary herbs and advanced herbs, and then we'd have iridology and reflexology and on through the whole list. And they had learned, come to learn about our holistic program and holistic means where we can help people without doing them any harm, no damage. Because they wanted to learn about taking these formulas and programs back to Israel. They were going back there, and they wanted to go back there and practice. He said, you know, I'm kind of confused with this program of yours. And I said, why are you confused? Well, he said, I've been with you now, this is early in this program, 11 months. And when I first started in your program, I was so badly constipated, he said I would have one small bowel movement a day, some days. But he said I ate like a horse. He said I would eat 3 or 4 times as much as most people. And then in between meals, I was always hungry and I was always snacking. And I could never get satisfied. And not much energy. Well, he says, I've been on this thing for 11 months. I eat less than 1/3 of what I used to eat. Less than 1/3. But he said, I'm having from 5 to 7 immense bowel movements a day, where I used to have one little one with eating 3 or 4 times more food. I can't figure this out. Well, I said, being of your nationality, you know nothing to worry about, because if you're getting something for nothing. And he said, oh, come on, cut it out. Tell me what's happening, what's actually happening. Well, here we have the bowel, and I drew him a picture of how that it accumulates toxic poison, it accumulates waste material, and layer upon layer of paste, which is our white flour products and et cetera, Twinkies, and a layer of that and a layer of fecal matter and another layer of fecal matter. When you cut that descending colon in 2 in autopsy, it looks like an old tree cut in 2. And I said, what we're doing is softening up the middle part. And the more liquid, because he was with the rest of them, he used 1 gallon of steamed distilled water a day plus the formulas. I said, what you're taking out in 1/8 of an inch is what is accumulated in there and impacted in there in weeks and weeks. And I said, you've got 40 years stacked in there. We do recommend storing food for bad times, but not in your bowel. Well, he began to get the picture. And he had more pep and energy than he'd ever known before in his life. It was not habit forming, because everyone that comes to us as patients go on our basics, which are, number 1, as we have mentioned before, 1 gallon of steamed distilled water a day. Number 2, clean out the bowel. Number 3, clean up the bloodstream. This is extremely important, but they must go on the 3-day cleanse every 30 days. 3 days of juice every 30 days. And the mucusless diet. Well, he had followed through on this. And in this program, he had tapered from 1 small bowel movement, sometimes once a day, to 5 to 7, and he leveled it off to better than 3 bowel movements a day the rest of his time, as long as I knew him. 3 bowel movements or more, and they do not have to be formed. They can be a spore type. When they are formed, it means there is still mucus in there, and it's doing too much forming. And this we want to eliminate as much as possible. We've got now a formula that should be with every one of your patients, every one of your friends, to, number 1, clean them out, because they're 90% of all disease starts in the bowel. then the bloodstream with your red clover combination, and then give them the fruits, vegetables, grains, nuts, and seeds in their wholesome state, and you have got the program on the road. With your laxatives, I'm not going into a lot of these because some of them we can use them singly and they're a purge and they're vicious. And some of them will cause nausea. But each time we get constipated, it means there's a lot of fecal matter in there, and the good Lord sends his little servants around to try and keep things in motion. And those little servants are called worms. And people say, worms? Oh. And I'll say, oh, don't worry, I think Pope Pius and your mayor both have them. Excuse me, but it's every place, unless they clean themselves out. Those worms aerate, and they keep the toxic poisons from accumulating and killing us. And whenever you look into the iris of the eye, on the descending colon especially, and you see your big bowel pockets, and then you see a worm pocket, that worm pocket is black, and it means that there is a deposit of worms there. And why are they there? Because we asked for them. We want them there. Not technically, but the subconscious mind says, we better get some worms, Lord, because that guy's so lousy. He's so filled up. He's got to have some aeration. And those worms come. To get rid of the worms without getting rid of the cause is the most stupid thing we could ever do. And we have, years ago, seen some worm cases that really startle you. We had a young fellow in his teens come to us, and he had a dry hacking cough. Always coughing. But nothing would come up. He'd never get any phlegm or anything. And one day, we gave him some lobelia as an emetic to see if something could happen there. And he brought up a fistful of worms that had been lodged in his throat. It was as big as a fist. Why, it's a wonder that he had survived, because these take the strength from a body. So many of these black pockets that you see in the iris of the eye, they are worm pockets. They go from mild, moderate to severe. Don't let them get severe. Yes?
After the vermifuge, can we use the natural X to instead of the senna, which seems to gripe a little bit?
Yes, we don't like senna, actually. We used it years ago before we caught on. We used plenty of the lower bowel to offset the senna and flush out. This whole program here is cleanliness. That's all. I remember a lady that made a statement to me that kind of was odd. She said, you gave me some vermifuge for worms. And she said, this morning I got up from the stool, and she said, I would like to blame it on one of the neighbors. She said there were 8 or 9 roundworms that were from 8 inches to a foot long and as big as a quarter to a half a dollar a round. She said, well, they were snakes, junior grade. And she said, I would like to have blamed it on somebody else besides me. I'm just too nice a person to have them. All right. I guess that's why they got away from her. Yes, that's an awful thing, roundworms. But they're there because we asked for them by not eating right, by not living right.
What kind of worms would you find in the sinuses? If someone reads an eye and says you've got parasites in the sinuses, what are they talking about? Are they worms? Or is it something else?
I don't know. I really don't know.
We've seen this, and with giving the vermifuge and other herbs like this, we'll find that they come out the ears.
They're worms?
Worms, little
So is there a formula that works for worms that are in the system rather than just the bowels?
Well, the vermifuge goes through the whole system.
Right.
Goes through the whole system.
So that would work, for instance.
Absolutely. This will take care of the pinworms and the roundworms. But tapeworm, now there is a worm that's a little evasive. We cannot read it in the iris of the eye. Or I haven't been able to. Maybe some of you can, but there's the thousands and thousands of eyes that I read. I've never been able to read tapeworm. As tapeworm, I can read a condition which tells me there must be tapeworms. And that condition is the individual is always famished. They eat like a horse. And they're always hungry. They can never get satisfied. But they don't get fat. They get skinnier and skinnier until they're a skeleton. I say there's tapeworm. Watch it.
Dr. Christopher, what would you do for worms in the liver?
This would be your vermifuge again and a castor oil fomentation. And castor oil fomentation is extremely important. But we also add to it the liver gallbladder formula. That plus the lower bowel, and it'll clean that out. Now this tapeworm, when it comes, how are we going to handle it? Because oftentimes the vermifuge won't. It takes a little bit more than that because they get big. You know, the tapeworm is like a tape measure. It's so wide but very, very thin. And you think, well, there isn't much power there. But you get a tapeworm in a person, and when they don't get fed well enough, they'll just shake that person up until it makes them nauseated and sick. I had one patient that dropped 32 feet of tapeworm. 32 feet. We've had many that's dropped 6, 9, 12 feet, but this one 32 feet. Well, after we have given the vermifuge and worked them over and got them ready, and that worm is showing anxiety in there because it's hungry, we take them off of food for a day or two. Then we have the patient sit on a container bucket. We used to call them a pot. That is partially filled with hot milk. And they sit on this pot with buttocks bared, of course. But they must stay there quietly because the tapeworm gets the fragrance, essence, odors of the milk, and it wants to come out after it. And so the tapeworm starts coming out. And you must not cut that worm off by stopping things. Let it keep flowing, because a worm, a tapeworm, if you cut off the head, it'll grow another head. If you cut off the tail, it'll grow another tail. It's a pretty smart little critter. And when the worm is all out, all right, we do advise taking the vermifuge again 3 days later to take care of the eggs that are there and get the young ones. One of the most vicious things that I know of are people who make money off of getting people to get tapeworms in their body. Minnie Ellen Raymond told me this story. She said she had never been a little girl because she'd always been a fatty from the time she was born. And then she found out that she got skinny, and she was wondering what to do. But the time she was skinny was when she had gone on straight meat, and she accumulated lots of worms. And she went back to her eating again and got fat once more. But she wondered what in the world she could take that would give her some relief when she saw an ad in a magazine. This was about the turn of the century. And it said, get one of our capsules for $1. And we guarantee you will get skinny. At that time, $1 was a lot of money. A lot of money. Well, she was excited about it. She wanted to get skinny. So she sent, and they sent her a package, and it had a capsule in it. She took the capsule out, someone knocked on the door, and so she put it in the saucer upon the window sill and went and answered the door. And when she came back and did the dishes, she looked up, and there that saucer was, and the sun had beat down on it and had melted the capsule. And there was a little worm crawling around. Well, she got the package that had been sent her, that she'd taken this capsule out of, and the saucer, and went to her medical doctor. And he looked at it, and she said, I never heard a man swear any worse than he did, because he put it under the microscope. And he said, someone has sold you a tapeworm for $1. He called the Drug Administration, which wasn't the National Health Federation. I mean, it wasn't the Pure Food and Drug then. But he called them and told them what had happened. He said, we'll take care of them. And so they did. They found out what the box number was, and they closed the box number, and they located the men, and they fined them $50. It was estimated, as near as they could tell, that they had sold over 100,000 of these at a buck a throw. Diaphoretic, D-I-A-P-H-O-R-E-T-I-C.
I'm sorry.
Oh, D-I-A-P-H-O-R-E-T-I-C.
Thank you so much.
Diaphoretic herbs. That's the $7 word. The common word that I use is sweating herbs. Sweating herbs. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it has saved many lives. And the more we come into the principle of using diaphoretics and the sweating herbs, the better off we will be. During the influenza attack that we spoke of yesterday, that took 2 million people in the United States and 8 million people on the face of the earth, or 20 million people on the face of the earth, with the diaphoretics, millions of those could have been saved. And we are coming into times of plagues that will be far worse than that. Far worse. Because our bodies are now so badly run down from processed foods and from using so many medical things that have been inorganic and torn down the body, where they are accepted but not assimilated. The body has weakened to a point that when the next plague hits, it is going to be rough. And only you who are prepared, only you who have your bodies in good condition, wherein a germ will say, holy cow, let's go next door. That person's too healthy. We've got too good a bloodstream. Just to give you the principle on this, it isn't anything miraculous at all. In a good, healthy condition, we have an area wherein germs can't operate. As you know, we talked about apple juice and the culture of the worst germs being destroyed by the time they hit the bottom of the glass. Too much oxygen, too much health. I had a friend, Roy Wilson, who had a large ranch down in southern Utah, Enterprise area, and he would give anybody a new suit of clothes or $100, that was when money was money, if they could find one worm in any of his vegetation on his many acres. And his soil was so healthy, the vegetation that grew on it was so healthy, that low type of animation wouldn't come around. And he was completely free. You could go through any of his fruits or vegetables and you would never find a worm. We proved this very definitely up in Granite, Utah. I was at this time doctoring in Salt Lake City. I had my offices on First South, and I had the opportunity to take over a 15-acre orchard. And it was an orchard of apricots and cherries. This man, who had operated the ranch for years up in Granite, had had many bad luck conditions. During the years that he'd had the farm, had very, very poor production. His worm yield was high, and his pH factor was low. But then the time came when he had broken his leg and he hadn't sprayed 1 year. And his worm yield was so bad that he had to leave the fruit on the trees and let it rot. It wasn't even worth picking. The worm yield was so high. So I got it at a pretty decent price, and I had it for 1 year. We put in 20 yards of cow fertilizer from the stockyards. We put in 80 yards, pardon me, and 20 tons of azomite. Now this is from the Azome Mining Company in Sterling, Utah, where it's the bottom of Lake Bonneville, where the material is organic. It is absolutely terrific, and it has so many trace minerals in that it's astounding. And so we put this on the soil, and when time came for harvest, I called a canning company in Murray, Utah. I had set up an organic farm store on State and Salt Lake, but when I had assigned people who was an artist, and he made a beautiful spread, organically grown fruits, and no inorganic fertilizers, et cetera, et cetera. And people will look at those signs and they didn't know what they meant. And they didn't patronize us. Well, the fruits that we had, the apricots and cherries, they didn't rot. They just dehydrated, and they were extra good. And so I called up the canning company. I was doctoring. I didn't have time to fuss with this any longer. And the head of the canning company said, "Yes, we'll be glad to get your crop. We're short this year. You have all of your spraying records ready." And I said, "We didn't spray." Well, I wouldn't walk across the street. I wouldn't even move to see it. I said, "You just might be pleased to know that it's an unusual crop without spraying." He says, "You're crazy. In fact, you're so crazy, I'm coming out to see what you got." And he came. He took samples of the apricots, he took samples of the cherries, and found out that we had the highest pH, the sweetest, the finest in the whole Salt Lake Valley. And our worm yield was the lowest. And he took the entire crop. Well, that took a load off my shoulders, but at least convinced me of one thing, that the soil and what it yields is like the human body and what it yields. Let's have it healthy. And here is the case. One way of cleaning up the human body is by using diaphoretics and sweating the poisons out of the body. One of our greatest diaphoretic groups of the sweating herbs, yarrow, of course, is one of my pets, as I have so many herbal pets. But yarrow is easily found, and there's a lot of it. It's called milfoil. It has a beautiful little fern-type leaf, but it comes in yellow and pink and white. A chamomile. Now, the chamomile is one of our choice diaphoretics and a very tasty drink, too. But of these first two that I'm mentioning, we have some interesting things about them. With yarrow, I will guarantee that if you will make a concentrated yarrow tea and massage that into the scalp 2 or 3 times a week, rinse the hair with yarrow tea, that regardless, don't look at me, of how white the hair is gone, it'll go back to its natural color.
How concentrated?
Hmm?
How concentrated do you make?
Oh, third power. Many people have just
I'm not clear what that means.
well, if we make up tea, which would be an ounce to the pint, a teaspoon to the cup, and just make up tea, that's single power. All right, a heaping. All right, we taper, we simmer this down to 1/2 its original amount. We've made up a quart of it. We bring it down to a pint. When it's brought down to a pint, it's called 3 power because it's 3 times as powerful as when it was first made.
You simmer that.
Simmer, don't boil it. Now, if it's brought down to 1/4 its original amount, it's called 7 power. 7 times as strong. That makes it quite potent. A gallon would be brought down to a quart. So this is first power, third power, and 7th power. Well, if you take yarrow